Picture this. A 5-year-old boy with his father's mischievous grin, speaking with an American accent, suddenly walking through the ancient halls of Windsor Castle. His little sister toddles behind him, her name carrying the weight of a beloved queen's legacy, yet her laughter purely Californian. These aren't just children, they're living bridges between two worlds that have been at war. Welcome back to Meghan and Harry Tales, where we explore the stories that matter, the truths that resonate, and the human journey behind the headlines. I'm Adrian, and today we're diving deep into something that could change everything we thought we knew about the royal rift. For years, the narrative seemed set in stone. Harry and Meghan exiled, estranged, building their empire of independence across the Atlantic, while the palace maintained its stiff upper lip. But what if I told you that behind closed doors, conversations are happening that could rewrite this entire story? But here's what's fascinating, and what we're going to explore today. The story isn't over, not by a long shot. Recent developments suggest that behind the palace walls and across the Atlantic, conversations are happening. Quiet discussions about healing, about children's futures, about what family really means when tradition meets transformation. Today, we're examining whispers of change in the air. Whispers that Archie and Lilibet's laughter could one day echo through British gardens, not as outsiders, but as warmly welcomed members of the family. This could be a new chapter of reconciliation, renewal, and maybe even redemption. So settle in, because this journey takes us from California sunshine to British tradition, from public perception to private pain, and ultimately to the question that defines our time: can love truly conquer all? Let's start with what's really happening behind closed doors, because the public narrative and the private reality, they're often two very different stories. Royal expert Ian Pelham-Turner recently shared thoughts that have reignited hope among royal watchers worldwide. He admitted the truth we all know: trust has been broken on both sides. The wounds run deep. Meghan has endured years of mistrust, unfair media portrayal and scrutiny that would break most people. The constant questioning of her motives, her background, her very humanity. And Harry, he's been caught in an impossible position, torn between loyalty to his wife and children and the institution that shaped his entire identity from birth. Imagine that internal struggle, the sleepless nights, the weight of choosing between the woman you love and the family that raised you. But here's where Turner's analysis becomes truly intriguing. He posed a question that cuts through all the noise. If the entire royal family truly did not trust Meghan and Harry, then why would King Charles personally arrange meetings between his top advisor and the Sussexes team? Think about that for a moment. This isn't protocol, this isn't public relations. This is a grandfather, a father, taking active steps to keep communication lines open. That is a telling sign, my friends. It suggests that this so-called lack of trust may not be as unanimous as critics want us to believe. The real tension, Turner suggests, might be more localized, perhaps with William, and honestly that makes sense when you consider the dynamics at play. William, the heir who stayed, watching his brother choose a different path. The psychology of sibling relationships under the microscope of royal duty, it's complex, it's painful, and it's deeply human. Turner's words carry weight when he says, "I hope that Harry and Meghan are warmly welcomed back to Britain with their children." Because this isn't just wishful thinking from a royal expert. This is someone who understands the inner workings, the private conversations, the subtle signals that indicate which way the wind is blowing. And the wind, it seems, might be shifting toward reconciliation. Now, let's talk about the most powerful potential bridge between California and Britain: Harry and Meghan's children. Because Archie and Lilibet aren't just adorable figures in family portraits, they represent something much more profound. They embody the possibility of healing, of blending two worlds that seem impossibly different. Former royal butler Grant Harold, who worked closely with King Charles during some of the most formative years of Harry's life, recently shared insights that made headlines. He suggested that Harry could be quite keen for his children to experience a British education. Let that sink in. After years of building a life in Montecito, after creating a safe haven thousands of miles from royal protocols and media intrusion, Harry might still want his children to walk the same historic school halls that shaped him. Harold, who knows Harry better than most outside the family, put it simply: it's very likely and completely possible. But what would that mean, practically speaking? Picture this: Archie, now a curious toddler who's only known California sunshine and American freedom, suddenly experiencing the weight of British tradition, learning about his grandfather the king, not just as family, but as the head of state, understanding that his last name carries centuries of history, and Lilibet named after her great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth, discovering that she shares a name with one of the most revered monarchs in history. These children would essentially be living bridges between two cultures, two approaches to life, two definitions of what it means to be royal. Former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond recently noted something fascinating. Children have a way of softening the hardest hearts. She's seen it time and again in royal families throughout history. When grandchildren enter the picture, when great-grandchildren start toddling around palace gardens, perspectives shift. Priorities realign. King Charles, despite all the complexity of recent years, is fundamentally a grandfather who has missed precious years with Archie and has barely met Lilibet. That kind of loss, missing first steps, first words, bedtime stories, it changes a person. It makes reconciliation not just preferable but necessary. Harry himself has been clear about his intentions. He wants his children to understand their heritage, all of it. The American spirit of independence and innovation that Meghan embodies, yes, but also the British tradition of service and continuity that flows through their royal blood. This isn't about choosing sides anymore. This is about giving Archie and Lilibet the full richness of their identity. But before we get too swept away in fairy tales of family reunions and children playing in palace gardens, we need to address the elephant in the room, the issue that towers above all others in Harry's mind: security. In ITV's documentary Tabloids on Trial, Harry didn't mince words. He laid bare his deepest, most fundamental concern. "It's one of the reasons why I won't bring my wife back to this country." This statement hit like a thunderbolt, but we need to understand what's behind it. This isn't paranoia, this isn't being difficult or dramatic. This is the cold, hard reality of a man who has lived through trauma that most of us can barely imagine. Harry served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He knows what real danger looks like. He's been trained to assess threats, to understand vulnerability, to recognize when someone's life is genuinely at risk. And he's witnessed firsthand the brutality of the British tabloid press and their willingness to cross any line for a story. Remember Diana, remember the car chase in Paris. Remember how a woman who should have been the most protected person in Britain became the most hunted. Harry lived through that loss. That trauma shaped him in ways we're still understanding. A source close to Harry told us weekly something that cuts to the heart of this dilemma. He'll always be fond of his home country, but his wife and kids are his priority. If that means keeping them safe and happy in Montecito, then that's the choice he'll make. And honestly, how can anyone argue with that? Every parent watching this understands that fundamental truth safety comes first. No crown, no palace, no tradition is worth more than the well-being of your children. The security issue isn't just about physical protection, it's about media intrusion, about privacy, about the ability to raise children without every playground visit becoming a front-page story. In California, Archie can attend school without photographers hiding in bushes. Lilibet can have playdates without security assessments. But here's the complex part. The British government's position on royal security creates a catch-22. Harry can't have the protection he believes his family needs without being a working royal, but he can't be a working royal under the current circumstances without compromising the very values that led him to step back in the first place. It's a puzzle with no easy solution, and until it's resolved, it remains the biggest obstacle to any meaningful reconciliation. So where does all of this leave us? Let's step back and look at the bigger picture, because the signs are there if you know how to read them. On one side, we have lingering mistrust, particularly between Meghan and certain members of the royal family, likely centred around William and potentially Kate. The wounds from the early years, the briefings against Meghan, the failure to protect her when she was most vulnerable, these aren't easily forgotten or forgiven. But on the other side, we have increasingly clear signs of warmth and willingness from King Charles, the private meetings, the invitations to Balmoral that have been extended, the fact that Charles has maintained relationships with Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland. These aren't accidents or protocol. These are the actions of a man trying to keep his family together. Royal biographer Tom Bower recently observed something telling. Charles understands that his legacy will partly be defined by whether he can heal this rift. Think about that. A king whose reign could be remembered not just for constitutional duties, but for whether he managed to bring his son home. And there are other signs, subtle but significant. The way palace statements have softened when referring to the Sussexes, the careful language that leaves room for future reconciliation, the fact that Harry and Meghan's royal titles haven't been stripped despite all the criticism. Former Royal Press Secretary Dickie Arbiter put it perfectly. Families fight, but families also forgive. He's seen this pattern before in royal history. The Duke of Windsor, the Princess Margaret controversies, even Charles and Diana's divorce, the monarchy has weathered family storms before and emerged stronger. What's different this time is the public nature of the split and the way social media amplifies every detail. But what's the same is the fundamental human desire for family unity, especially when grandchildren are involved. The hope for Archie and Lilibet bridging two cultures isn't just romantic idealism. It's based on the very real power of children to transform family dynamics. When King Charles looks at photos of Archie, does he see the grandson he barely knows, or does he see Harry at that age? When he thinks about Lilibet, does he remember the great-grandmother she was named for, the woman who taught him duty and service? These emotional connections run deeper than public feuds or media narratives. What this moment reveals is that the Sussexes' story isn't one of permanent exile. It's not a tale with a predetermined ending. Instead, it's a story of choices rooted in love, in safety, in the determination to live authentically while honouring family bonds. The path forward isn't simple, but it exists. It requires compromise from all sides. It requires the British establishment to evolve, to recognise that supporting Harry and Meghan doesn't mean controlling them. It requires security arrangements that protect without imprisoning. It requires media regulations that respect privacy, without stifling legitimate reporting. Most importantly, it requires family members to prioritise relationships over perceptions, love over protocol, healing over being right. Royal expert Richard Fitzwilliams recently made an observation that resonates. The monarchy's greatest strength has always been its ability to adapt. If it can't adapt to include Harry and Meghan while respecting their choices, it risks becoming irrelevant to younger generations. That's not a threat, it's a reality. Archie and Lilibet represent the future, not just of the Sussex family, but potentially of the monarchy itself. They embody a more diverse, more global, more inclusive vision of what royalty could become. And perhaps, just perhaps, the future holds space for a reunion. Not because Harry and Meghan need the royal family to validate their choices, but because the royal family, whether they fully admit it or not, needs Harry and Meghan to remain relevant and connected to the modern world. So, here's the question I leave you with today. Could the next chapter of the royal story be one not of division, but of healing? Could Archie and Lilibet be the ones who finally draw these two worlds together? If reconciliation does come, and I believe it will, it won't be Meghan and Harry bending to the old system. It will be the system realising it can only survive and thrive by opening its arms to the couple who dared to step away, who showed that love and family can transcend duty and tradition. Because after everything, after the headlines, the battles, the years of separation, Harry and Meghan still stand together. Stronger, wiser, more committed to their values than ever. And they're raising two children who could very well be the bridge between old and new, between tradition and transformation. And isn't that, in the end, the real definition of modern royalty? Not crowns or castles, but the courage to love authentically, to protect fiercely, and to build bridges where others see only walls. This has been Meghan and Harry Tales. I'm Adrian, and I'll see you next time with more truth, more heart, and more stories that remind us why the Sussexes' journey matters to all of us. Until then, keep believing in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds.